Hell, I just got the PI's report. This is the fourth investigation in as many years. Jason Thomas, the private investigator, just did it. I've used 4 different private investigators in the last 4 years using random cities, random times of the year, etc., thinking my wife and her lover had cheated the previous ones, but this new investigator would discover their deception. I just got off the phone with Mr. Thomas. He told me that his people here and his colleagues in Dallas had observed my wife Molly and John Decker during the week, both when they were in their office the first 4 days of the week, and in Dallas where they both attended a work seminar for 3 days. My wife Molly was the administrative assistant to John Decker, the CEO of a subsidiary of a large international holding company. As administrator and assistant, she usually traveled with him, and he traveled a lot. Mr. Thomas said he would send a written report, but in general he noted, for 4 days here before traveling to Dallas, they were watched and observed. They had lunch together all 4 days and then went right back to work. On the second day, the two of them went to a local bar after work. They each had 2 drinks, and then each went to their homes. Their spouses were home when they got there, and we stopped surveillance, assuming that the spouses would be aware of their activities until the next morning. The other 3 days, they both came straight home from work, and their spouses were there when they arrived. The trip to Dallas wasn't much more interesting. Each of the 3 days, they attended a work seminar, as they were supposed to. Each night, they had dinner together, and each night, they went dancing. After about an hour of dancing and drinking, they would disperse to their hotel rooms and not come out until morning. Their rooms were separated by 10 other rooms, so there was no connecting door between the rooms. A camera down the hallway showed that each night none of them left their room until the next morning. The only thing that was suspicious was their dancing. My agent described it as 2 people in love dancing. There was no inappropriate touching, but there was definitely intimacy, and he usually hugged her all the way to their table. They were followed to the airport, and the agent made sure they boarded and that the plane did indeed go home. 4 private investigator reports for random dates over the past 4 years have found basically the same information. Nothing. Molly and I are both 36 years old and have been married for 15 years. We were exclusive for the last 3 years of college and married shortly after graduation. Molly is not beautiful, but she could be considered a sweet doll with a fantastic 5'6" inches body. She is very outgoing, and people like having her around. Her boss, John Decker, is about my height, 6'1", 190 pounds. But if it were between the 2 of us, John, not me, would get all the girls' attention. He's a pretty attractive man. I talked to Molly several times about her apparent closeness to John Decker. The first few times she said there was nothing between them except work. She promised she would never fool around behind my back and even offered to take a lie detector test anytime I wanted. She said they were just co-workers and good friends. The last time we talked about it, she called him a special friend. I think he got a promotion. Molly and I went out to dinner and dancing a few times with John and his wife Gail. John and Molly talk to each other and dance with each other much more than they do with us, their spouses. One day when John and Molly were out on the dance floor, I noticed that Gail raised an eyebrow as if to say, "What, again?" I think she notices their closeness too. I talked to Molly about getting another job just to appease me, just because I'm really jealous that she's so close to John. She says, "That's silly." She loves her job. And again tells me that she would never go behind my back, and that she would be willing to take a lie detector test. I have spent thousands of dollars on private investigators over 4 years and found nothing. Last night, Molly was sitting at the kitchen table when I walked by. In a more serious tone than usual, she said, "Tom, can I talk to you for a minute?" When I sat down, she told me that John and Gail had invited us to their lake house for the weekend. I told them I'm sure we'd love to go, but I'd have to consult with you. I think that would be great. Is that okay with you? The first thing that came to my mind was that 5 days a week at work isn't enough. Now you want to be with him on the weekends, too. I tried, but I couldn't think of a reason not to go. With obvious distaste, I said, "Okay." Friday afternoon, Molly and I packed up the car and headed to John and Gail's house by the lake. We had a map to show us how to get there, but I tried to catch her asking, "Have you been there before?" She said she hadn't been, but I'm not sure I believed her. We drove about 50 miles, and finally around 4 o'clock we pulled up to the lake. It took a while to find their house, but when we finally did, There were 4 people waiting for us on the porch. The only one I knew was John. I assumed Gail was inside. In addition to John, the welcoming committee consisted of a very large, well-built man, a middle-aged woman who appeared to be his wife, and an extremely attractive 20-something woman. She had long red hair, and I would have considered her beautiful. Everyone but her was wearing shorts and t-shirts. She was wearing a tiny bikini. We parked and headed to the porch. After we were introduced to everyone, I asked John where Gail was. He said she wasn't here, but didn't explain why. I thought it was a little odd that we had come to visit John and Gail wasn't there. Probably because I'd been pondering Molly and John's relationship for years, my spidey senses began to activate. Was John fooling around with this beautiful young woman? Did Gail find out about this? What does Molly know about this young lady? Molly didn't seem at all surprised to see her here. Molly and I were shown to our room. We dropped the small amount of luggage we had brought with us and then joined the others in the large room. The building and interior were not bad. I would guess there were 5 bedrooms and as many bathrooms. A very large man who introduced himself as Larry sometime in there asked if I wanted a beer. I said sure, and he gestured for me to follow him into the kitchen. He seemed very eager to draw me into a one-on-one conversation, so I talked to him for 10-15 minutes. He was a very pleasant man, but after a while I was ready to join the others. Oddly enough, when we got back to the big room, he announced loudly, "We're back." Even stranger, Molly and John were standing in the corner, and I could have sworn they were scared. They were both red-faced and seemed to be backing away from each other. I didn't like anything I had seen so far. Gail isn't here. Larry seemed to want me to talk to him in the kitchen. Who is this young, gorgeous girl? Molly seemed to be in John's arms. I had to ask Molly what the hell was going on, so I went back into the kitchen and gestured for Molly to follow me. She must have seen that I was at the very least confused and probably very upset. Instead of following me into the kitchen, Molly stopped and asked John if there was somewhere private where Molly and I could talk. No one seemed at all surprised by this request. At that moment, my spidey senses went up in flames. John pointed out a room we could use, and Molly and I went in and closed the door. "Molly, what the hell is going on?" She had this look on her face like she was finally facing something she was afraid to talk about. "Tom, I haven't been completely honest with you about this weekend, but please let me explain everything without interrupting. When I'm done, I'll answer any questions you have, and I'm sure you'll have plenty. First of all, Gail decided not to come this weekend. Gail, John, and I have had several lunch meetings planning this weekend. When I'm done, I think you'll understand why you weren't invited to these meetings. All of this is basically Gail's idea, with some input from both John and me. John has accepted a promotion that will require a move to England. He and Gail will be moving in 2 weeks. He will be replaced by a woman from the Cleveland office. I'm sure John leaving and being replaced by a woman will please you. There are 2 things I have to tell you about John and me. First, as I've always told you, John and I never had an affair. We've never been in the same bed together. Second, and this is the hardest thing I've ever had to tell you, I love you now as much as I always have, but I'm also in love with John. Let me emphasize, I didn't just say I love John. I said I was in love with John. I couldn't keep quiet any longer. I jumped to my feet and screamed. "I can't believe this. You brought me to this jerk's house to tell me you're leaving me for this very jerk. I'm out of here and you can find your own way home." "Oh, that's right. We don't have a home anymore. You're going to England with that jerk." I headed for the door when Molly grabbed my arm and screamed, "Please, Tom, that's not what I said at all. Please sit down and let me finish. I love you, and I will not leave you, never, ever, ever. You are my husband, and I will be with you until death do us part." I sat down again. Let me reiterate that this is basically all Gail's idea. I think the next thing I should do before I go on about why we're here this weekend is to tell you who the other people are and why they're here. The nice man you were talking to in the kitchen is named Larry. He is the head of security for our company and is just here to make sure everyone is happy. I intervened. "So, he's here to keep me in line, right?" Molly didn't answer, just continued introducing herself to other people. "Jackie, a lovely girl, and she's here for you if you want her. She's a sweetheart and also a high-class escort. Janet is actually Larry's wife and also a great cook." Suddenly a light went on in my head. The rest of this charade suddenly became perfectly clear. I could see exactly what Molly, John, and Gail were planning. Molly knew that John would disappear from her life after this weekend. The two lovers, John and Molly, would spend the weekend to finally be together as lovers. Afterward, John and his wife Gail will embark on their adventure to England. On Sunday, after watching my wife make love to someone else all weekend, she and I will hold hands, gallop merrily to our car, and live happily ever after. Is this woman crazy? They brought Larry in to make sure I don't kill John or just accidentally drown my unfaithful wife. Jackie's here to offer me sex. All this to give John and Molly a weekend of love and sex. Molly, I don't agree with any of this shit. Where the hell is Gail? You're saying this was all her idea. Where the hell is she? She decided it would be better for her emotional well-being if she wasn't here. In exchange for the weekend, John signed a post-wedding agreement that if we have contact of any kind at any time in the future, John gets nothing in the divorce and Gail gets 100% of the assets. I signed a similar paper for you. The effect of both documents begins when John and Gail leave for England. Since John and I work together, both documents also stipulate that there will be no sexual or romantic contact between us between this Sunday night and the day they leave for England. Tom, I really will be all yours after this weekend, and I vow to spend the rest of my life making up for the pain I am causing you now. Why am I here when Gail's not? There's no way you would have agreed to let me come to John's lake house without you. Same reason you weren't invited to the planning dinners. You'd just say hell no to anything. What if I just said no to all this damn shit now and asked you to either join me for an immediate trip home or stay here with John and say goodbye to our marriage? Tom, it's not like that. Please understand that while you are my soulmate for life, I need this weekend with John to be complete. Besides, Gail's expecting your call. Since this is primarily her idea, she'll explain everything to you. Her number's on the kitchen table. Molly, I'm asking you again not to do this. If you do, we're done. Molly came up to me, kissed me passionately on the lips, and then said, "Everything will be all right, you'll see." Then, without listening to my objections, Molly left the room, took the waiting John by the hand, and they disappeared from sight. Larry kept his eyes on me for the rest of the evening and was constantly between John and me. I seriously considered just leaving and filing for divorce, but I needed to know what it all meant and how far it would go. There are no words to describe my state of mind. I was furious. I wanted to wring the neck of that bastard and my unfaithful wife. Realizing that I couldn't handle Larry, I pretended to be almost resigned to my fate and just wait for the weekend to be over. I found Jackie and told her, "You're very tempting, but I'm not going to help Molly break our wedding vows. Molly's going to have to do it herself." I told Jackie that as far as I was concerned, she could go home, or if she was curious, she could stay and laugh at all the craziness. The next time I saw the lovers was at dinner. Janet had obviously been told how to seat everyone. John sat at the head of the table, Molly next to him. Larry was between me and John, and Jackie next to me. Janet, when not serving, sat across from her husband, Larry. I assumed that by now my beautiful wife had become a cheater, thus making me a cuckold. I noticed, probably at John's suggestion, that she wore no wedding rings. The only thing I did during the entire meal was I pointed to her bare toe. After dinner, Jackie put on a beautiful red bikini and went for a swim. I sat by the pool, wondering if I had made the right decision not to use her services. Then John and Molly came out, holding hands, wearing swimsuits. Larry sat down next to me and tried to make conversation. It was obvious that this whole charade had been prearranged. He was watching my every move and made it clear that nothing good would happen to me if I only moved toward my cheating wife and her lover. Shortly after everyone had gathered by the pool, Molly came over and sat down next to me. She put her head on my shoulder and said, "I love you, Tom. It's going to work out. We'll talk when we get home." I thought, this woman is crazy. I quickly got up and walked away, telling her loud enough for everyone to hear, "Go to fuck the bitch." Tears spurted from Molly's eyes, but she didn't respond to me in any way. I avoided everyone for the rest of the evening, except Larry, of course. He was always around, always keeping an eye on me. I decided to call Gail. Maybe she could shed some light on this train wreck. She must have been expecting my call and answered on the first ringtone. She must have added me to her caller ID. In a sad voice, she asked, "How's all this sad business going? Are you still at the lake house?" "Gail, what the hell made you come up with this disaster?" I don't know about you and John, but it ruined my marriage to Molly. Tom, let me explain what I've been thinking. I confess I was thinking about my own marriage to John. I wasn't thinking too much about you and Molly. I think women can move on and forgive infidelity more easily than men. I know that John loves Molly deeply and suffered for 4 years because of her refusal to have sex with him. She always told him she wouldn't have a cheap affair behind your back. I offered them a compromise, a weekend of sex and love in exchange for never contacting each other again. I couldn't imagine them, thousands of miles apart, but in constant communication. I was afraid of where this could lead. If they ever connect in the future, in any way, it could destroy each of us. I didn't invite you to planning lunches because you'd just say no to everything. And to you, go to hell. And be sure that the way you have planned will definitely not happen, I growled, and ended the call. Entering our bedroom, I found, unsurprisingly, that the only luggage in there was mine. Molly's stuff had been moved, so it was no longer our bedroom, but just my bedroom. It made me very sad to think that Molly and John were now in their bedroom. As I lay in bed, I kept wondering how Molly could have thought that after this weekend, she and I could just magically resume our loving relationship. All I could assume was that their 4-year emotional affair, while not sexual, made them think the world owed them and everyone would understand their needs. I stayed awake and kept a close eye and ear on everything that was going on. Around midnight, Jackie knocked on my door and came in to ask if I was okay. She also reminded me that she was still available if needed. I thanked her for the offer and told her that my refusal was one of the hardest things I had ever done, but no thanks. She said she was sorry for my decision. I quietly walked out to the pool. The hot tub was separated from the pool by a 3-foot stone wall, so I found a lounge chair, pulled it up to the tub, and quietly settled down on it. Naturally, my watchman was probably asleep in his room near the cheater's bedroom, and he wasn't around. I waited for an hour or so, then suddenly I heard voices approaching the pool. I immediately recognized the voices as those of 2 lovers. They couldn't see me, but I was only 10 feet away from them, hidden behind a short stone wall. Molly said, "Oh, John, this is so wonderful. I've loved you for so long, and I can finally show you how much. I'm going to miss you, but we have 2 days to spend in love and remember it for a lifetime. Let's get naked and make love in the pool. Take off your clothes and I'll get us a couple drinks." Molly got up and went to the kitchen to get the drinks. I hated him, and hated Molly for the absolute emptiness I felt. I had finally waited for the moment for which I had endured all day of humiliation from this asshole and my wife. John was out of his clothes and waiting for Molly when I approached him from behind. I yelled loud enough for everyone in the house to hear me. "Hey, Moodak!" Moodak seemed to have become my nickname for him. When he turned around, the red-hot rage I'd been saving up all day hit adrenaline in my veins, and I kicked him, aiming for his balls and hoping to completely ruin his experience of my wife's sex. He bent in half, and catching the next kick of my leg with his chin, fell backwards into the pool. I knew Larry would soon get out of bed and come after me, but I didn't think there would be a physical confrontation with him. He could yell at me, but he wouldn't want to face assault charges, and anyway, the damage to his boss had already been done, and Larry wouldn't be looking for revenge. The fact that Molly had come running over to see if John was okay, but hadn't bothered to check on me, was filed away in my mind. I had seen enough. Everything I had planned after my slut wife's message I had accomplished, so there was nothing else keeping me here. I grabbed my bag, got in my car, and drove home. One thing I did before I left, however, was to remove my wedding ring and leave it on the kitchen table. Molly might have realized that our married life was over. I spent the rest of the weekend sitting at home in a recliner chair and staring at the TV. I really wasn't paying much attention to what was happening on the screen. My thoughts were preoccupied with picturing my beautiful wife with that jerk John. Since I was at the lake house and knew the layout, I could picture them in different rooms, cuddling with a big smile, kissing as they embraced each other, her in bed with him, doing things that should be just for me. I wondered what she would say when she got home, if she did. I really wish she hadn't come back, but I don't know where else she could have gone. Sunday night, a car pulled up and stopped in front of my house. It was John and Molly. John got out of the car with the intention of walking over to open her door. He must have asked Molly to wait and let him walk over and open her door, obviously for my humiliation. I guess he'd forgotten that the human body stiffens after an injury and then a long drive. He wrinkled his nose on his way out of her door from the kick I gave him 2 days ago. He had to hang on to 2 car fenders to get around the side of the car. Finally, he walked over to it and opened its door, looking rather awkward. He helped Molly out of the car. More to the point, Molly helped John help her out of the car. I was glad that my parting shot at the lake house had apparently interfered with their lovemaking. It was all to show me that he was giving her back to me after she stayed with him when she had a choice between him or me at the lake house. They embraced each other like lovers, not caring what I or the neighbors might think. I'd had enough. I opened the front door and took a step toward John. "Asshole, if you're not out of here in 5 seconds, I'm going to do more than beat the shit out of you." John, limping, quickly walked back to his car and drove off. I went back into the house and sat down in my deep chair. Molly didn't even watch him drive away. She walked in the front door with a fake smile on her face. "I'm home, honey." Her behavior seemed so ridiculous, she acted like she had just come home from a party with the girls. I just ignored her and continued watching TV. She came over and tried to kiss me, but I pushed her away. The only thing I said to her was, "From now on, you're in the guest bedroom. Tomorrow I'm going to see a lawyer and start the divorce papers. If you haven't forgotten, the house was mine before we were married and your name isn't on any of the papers. So think before tomorrow about where you're going to go to live. You can start packing your things. Don't try to tell me anything. From now on, I won't talk to you anymore, and all our communication from now on will be through lawyers. From now on, you can be free to replace your lost lover with whoever you want." I went back to watching TV. Molly's shoulders slumped, realizing that reconciliation was impossible. She sobbed bitterly as she walked up the stairs. She had lost both her lover and her husband in one weekend.